meeting to order, or the Finance Committee meeting for July 2024. Roll call.
Dr. Gallagher?
Present.
Chair Nunez? Sorry, Chair Pimentel?
Yep.
Matt Covrantes? Jessica Dixon? And Julie Peterson?
Here.
Yeah.
Any changes to the agenda? Public comments, this is an opportunity for members of our board or attendees or anybody online to provide any public comments related to our Finance Committee or to the hospital in general. Do you have any public comments?
We do have an online attendee, but I do not see any hands raised.
Ivory is our senior financial one, the interim contractor, sitting in Texas, I think.
Any comments from our attendees? That's the idea of a hospital township, maybe that's. Put that on the next agenda. Yeah. Different subcommittee. Comments from our committee members? Seeing none, let's move into consent. We have our minutes from June 25th, 2024, that were included in the board packet. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? And just clarify that's approving the consent that has the minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gallagher and Peterson?
Yes.
Correct? All right, Jessica Dixon? Yes. Julie Peterson?
Yes.
Dr. Gallagher?
Yes.
And Chair Pimentel?
Yes. Next item is item number 2 on our discussion items today. The first is our quality assurance fee cash advance update from.
Yeah, well, I think it was about a year ago or so when we approved the ability for me to do cash advances against the future cost funds. Typically get most of them from the Alliance Managed Medical Plan, and so part of that approval was that when I took one, I would bring it back to the let you know, and so we did take one at the third week in July. I took an advance against the October payment of $3 million to help with each.
We understand the context of the comments.
Yeah, what happens is we have a schedule of when we're expecting to receive funds, and in October we should be receiving about $5.2 million worth, and so I take advance of 3 now, and then they'll just send me the other 2 or whatever the final balance is there. And I sign a little promissory note, and we've done this a number of times, and if for some reason, I mean, we know we're going to get at least $5 million, but if for some reason we got less than 3, I would pay the rest back out of the claims.
And they charge no fees, no.
Yeah, no fees, no interest. They're
Wonderful collaboration.
Very wonderful partners.
There's no action on this item. It's just thank you very much for always looking out for us, and I appreciate the collaboration. Also on the team on the deadline, I appreciate the alliance for the help.
Yeah.
And could we let the record show that Matt Covrantes is present at 12:04?
Yes. Thank you. So item number 3 is our financial performance for June 2024.
Maybe.
All right, so here's a look at month to date. We did not meet our budget this month. We are about $815,000 consolidated loss. We had very soft volumes in June, and so really hit us somewhat in the net revenue side. I have to say, you can only flex so far when you have low volumes, but I do feel that there was some good flexing, as kind of evidenced in our actual labor budget there. But I think, there's only so far you can go with that. to talk at the year-to-date. So, you know, although we did not have a great June, we are still favorable to our budget, both at the EBITDA level, the net loss level. You can see we still have about, a $1.1 million favorable on the net loss. We're at $813,000 as opposed to $1.9 million. You know, we've been talking all year that supplies has been one of our largest areas of, an unfavorable variance, that we're still just really trying to get good reporting from our new GPO partner, Vizient, and our own internal staff, to try to identify where we have some opportunities there, whether it be better tier, getting into better tiers, other opportunities, you know, just to maybe consolidate and look at usage and look at just better pricing with a different vendor for some of the more commodity-like items. And of course, you know, anything that's more patient care related with a physician preference would go through the products committee. But this is an area that, you know, we know we can't let down on, and we actually have another kind of subgroup that's just started up, really trying to get a very good meeting about looking at making sure we're charging, for the supplies that are billable, and that we have those set up, because we're identifying ones that aren't set up, and we don't want to be leaving that money on the table. It could really help our bottom line and our ability to meet our budget. Other than that, you know, the only other, you know, large variance you see here is the one that we've previously talked about in other, which really has to do with, the QAF fees that we pay were higher than we had budgeted, but that also has resulted in higher than budgeted revenues. So looking at some of the volumes, you know, admissions, they were down 14% from the prior month, and they're down almost 9% from June of '23. So they were pretty soft admissions for us, 238. Deliveries, this is what I think the lowest delivery month that I've seen that I could remember, at 48 deliveries. Definitely a drop because we had a pretty high May. So this is average daily census was below, volume actually fell below 30. We were at 29.4, and the biggest changes that we saw was in ICU and the OB days. So we would kind of follow what we saw on the deliveries. Surgeries, inpatient surgeries, we had that nice little pop-up last month where I was feeling like maybe they were going to kind of regain a little bit. But they dropped back down to 42. One of the things that we've seen, and you'll see it when we talk about budget, is really that shift from inpatient to outpatient. And as we've had some discussions, we've, you know, understood that some of that was really around the work that case management's been doing to better identify medical necessity and what qualifies as an outpatient surgery versus an inpatient surgery. So you're definitely, when we go to the budget side, you'll see where we're transitioning that from a budget perspective. But we've certainly just been looking at the cases kind of down at the physician and specialty level, seeing that shift and had that somewhat validated by the surgeons. They don't think they're doing anything differently, but we're categorizing things better. So they weren't knowingly doing fewer inpatient surgeries. And of course, when surgeries are down, that drives down the whole acuity. And last month we had a really high acuity. Outpatient visits, the non-ER outpatient visits have kind of continued to be hampered by the staffing challenges in imaging. We do now have some staff back in imaging. We're hearing we're going to open up mammography back to 7 days a week, 6 or 7. where we've been down at about 2 days a week. So that's really can help with, some of the non-ER visits. And then, June looks like it took a bigger drop. I mean, it did drop a few days, but it's, also, we had, you know, May had really spiked around the Memorial Day weekend, so, June's kind of back more in the norm. On surgeries, so surgeries were really, they were down both inpatient and outpatient this month, kind of compared to what we had been seeing this year. I mean, we've seen, stronger surgery this year than we were doing at this time last year, but, down from what it has been, and even the robot surgical cases dropped this month, almost in half. I don't know if there was any particular surgeons that were on vacation in June. A few. A couple, for like a week.
I ask just while we're here, I mean, it's related to OB and surgeries and robot surgeries. What level are we able to indicators now of moms are after 7 months? We checked out what OB might be. I mean, are we seeing any indicators, or do we have awareness, any underlying indicators of what the next 6 months might look like in either robot surgeries, other surgeries, or scheduling, or OB?
For OB, we could probably, I don't think we have a report like that, but there's something called EDC, the estimated date of confinement over. But looking at that from our OB clinic, so it could inform like what their projected volume is, because that's a common thing to do. I don't know that we have that capability of reporting, but something we could look at because it would help us with staffing. Not the ones who obviously are not part of the community who just come by and deliver, but looking at the OB clinics that we're dealing with. I imagine that they could probably do something.
I'm not overreacting. I mean, 1 month is 1 month. That's our.
Yeah, it's typical, I mean, baby season, as you'll know, August is usually a busy month for delivering babies. I don't know if you count back what happened in February, but there were a lot of babies in August. Something happened, Valentine's Day, but something happened. So, yeah, we can start looking at that too, checking out.
Yeah, I defer to that, if that makes sense. That's true.
I mean, you know, I think we're always open to things that help us predict staffing and or understand, you know, when we have kind of spikes and drops, so.
And on the surgery side, you know, we do feel like we have the demand on the surgery side, and we have some inefficient processes around blocking that time and scheduling that time, and so we're working on, the surgery team are working on what does that block schedule policy look like, and updating that into best practices where we're not letting doctors just hold on to it because they think they might schedule something, but if they haven't scheduled something, you know, in advance, that block time gets released and somebody else can schedule into that time, so you have to wait. Very good.
I'm meeting with Dr. Brandt actually right after this meeting to talk about restructuring our block time to make it more productive and then using two other surgeons. So, hopefully, we'll have a process we can report on that.
Phyllis and I have some best practices from our previous places of employment. We have brought some data stuff here.
Yeah. Payer mix, you know, the payer mix kind of did okay, despite everything else that was going on in the month of June. We ended up with 14.3% inpatient commercial and 31.5% on the Medicare, and really most of that dip came from the Managed Medi-Cal Alliance. On the outpatient side, again, commercial was strong, up about 1.5 points from last month at 24.8, and that pretty much all came out of the Alliance bucket. Everything was pretty flat. So, you know, kind of I think it could have been a better month if we had had more volume, because things were, other indicators were working around productivity and just, you know.
What are the setting of trends
2023, you mean in terms of like how quickly we're being paid, or?
Yeah, that's another way to look at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're looking at that in like 2 to 4 week periods, because we know that, you know, Medicare pays every 2 weeks, and, our team, especially like Regina, who's the rev cycle director, she'll be in constant contact with the business office and coding. It's like, you know, we're gonna hit the 30th, you gotta get in as much to drop and be submitted, because if it goes out on the 30th, we'll get paid on like the 14th.
Oh, really?
So we do that, you know, with the Alliance, they pay about every 21 days. And so whenever we see anything kind of dropping off in volumes there, she's on the phone to understand if they've got like a backlog, because they've had some backlog of some outpatient stuff, and, you know, kind of how quickly are they turning that around. And then pretty much everything else, I say, kind of falls in the 30-day range, and so that's what the business office, they're doing follow-up, and we're trying to track, you know, the larger dollars. We kind of watch it from each bucket.
And maybe it's probably a better topic as we get to the budget, but on the supply, imagine let's say that's more of a budget conversation about how we use this year's information about supplies to inform budgets for next year. So, any other questions on financial performance?
I don't want it to inform the
Yeah, no,
budget for
I
next year.
yeah.
I want it to, I want us to resolve some of it, but it does.
Yeah.
It does, just because when we have a resolution, we kind of have to pretend like it's still gonna be at that level.
Good questions on? I appreciate getting that early peek at July. Seeing none, we can move on to our next item, budget update for June 2024. Oh, I forgot to ask any questions from public or attendees.
You have the finance team, and that's our business intelligence manager, and I read it. Financial analyst. And they have been, I'm super happy that they're on the phone here to hear this, because they have been a big part of the budget process, along with Chad, so far in what we've got, as well as some of our folks from the revenue cycle, and Regina. So, let's start here. This is the budget calendar that I showed last month, and just to show that we're kind of tackling the 3 items that are highlighted there, not in as much detail as you might imagine, especially the first one. We're not going to go through every productivity standard or department level volumes, but I'm going to give you a little bit of highlights there, talk a little bit about what we're thinking with the net revenue and CDM, and some of the inflation factors. I am also going to touch on one of the items from the August 28th meeting, which might be very helpful now that we're not having an August 28th meeting, but which is supposed to be the target. So, slide. All right, so some very high-level budget assumptions here. You know, we are planning to do a CDM increase. Last year we did the charge master increase. Strategically 8% overall, but that meant that some things got greater than 8%, some things took a dip, some things had no change. This year we do plan on, again, kind of doing a targeted approach. I don't think the CDM increase itself will be anything more than about 2 or 3%. I've kind of been using 3% right now, but we will target the top 5 service line areas. And what we use by service line, kind of revenue service lines, so we're talking OR, ED, L&D, the room and board charges, and the observation. That makes up about 80% of our accounts receivable as we look at it each month. And I think, you know, if we do a 3%, you know, going to be hopeful that we can get a 0.5% of net revenue improvement just from the charge master increase. You get very little, because you really only get it from commercial and in certain, you know, certain things that are either percent of charges or have a built-in, baked-in increase to the contract. I do believe that there's probably another 1.5% or so of net revenue increase or improvement that I'm gonna be trying to work through more details and get into this budget. We've got some modest increases, inpatient volume, we're, trying to grow at about 1%, and outpatient is roughly 2%, although I'll show you a little bit of more detail. And some of the biggest growth, again, is gonna be in the surgical cases. From the expense side, it's about 2.5% in wages so far, and all of these things are still going through a lot of review and, more detailed work by Chad and his team. And, but the 2.5 kind of helps, or it kind of gets lowered by the fact that we are doing like 6-month increases with a lot of our labor contracts as opposed to just one-time 3%. They might work out to 3% overall, but it'll be like a 1.5%, or we've got some really exciting news with increasing our benefits, because we changed the brokers and everything's gone out to market, and Margaret's gonna do the presentation tomorrow night at the board meeting to kind of give you the highlights. But all said and done with everything from health benefits, dental, vision, life and disability benefits, other small things, we're gonna look at about a 2.5% increase this year. If we had stayed with our old broker, it was estimated by the underwriters to be closer to 7% increase. And so we're very excited because we're gonna get, no coverage will decrease, but in some cases we'll have the ability for more coverage, and a very modest increase with some good protections for future years. Some good ways to help us manage our benefits expense.
Stable monthly premium.
Yes, that's gonna be a lifesaver for us just in itself. Right now we are budgeting about a 3.3%, or talking about 3.3% supply increase. Again, a lot of work needing to be done there. Current CPI that I looked at is about 3.2, so that's kind of our default when we don't have a better number. But again, Chad has been tasked with his team, trying to get as good a numbers as we can when we can get that level below and find out that pharmacy might cost more, or utilities, as you noted here. So we're still going through this, but this is kind of where we're landing right now. And at the end of the day, the projected EBITDA target that we're going to be shooting for this year is somewhere between $5 and $6. I will show you in a future slide what that really is going to mean. So quickly, I kind of threw together, was thinking about the payer mix, and so I threw together some slides just so you can see kind of what's happening and understand. I'd like to kind of continue the tweak on payer mix, thinking we're seeing some positive movement in our payer mix. And if all the work that we're doing to, work with partners such as our Kaiser docs, or, look at other opportunities at, bringing in specialists, things that, can grow the commercial side of the business. I made some very modest projections for moving from first column being what we did in 2023, second column being a rolling 12, which is basically half 23, half 24, and then just making little tweaks, what could possibly be a good payer mix for 25. And, interestingly, just modeling this a little bit on, kind of the same, using our June year-to-date results, the shift, if you applied 2023 versus rolling 12 payer mix, the shift that we've seen in the first 6 months was worth $1.5 million. And if I do this little tweak that I've suggested in the third column, the 2025 column, that's worth another $400,000. So, the more we can do continue to build the commercial volume, that is, can make nice improvements out of a lot of movement. This is kind of a recap and a little bit more detail than what we brought, before, and we've updated it, we brought some high-level volumes to the last board meeting, but this is, we've updated kind of our rolling 12 base, and now we're kind of locking that in, as we're not gonna continue to update our rolling 12 base. We will, continue to monitor it as we look through the budget, but since we're trying to lock down our volumes as they drive revenue and, labor costs and some of the other costs, but really those two primarily, we want to lock them down. So, as you can see here, pretty modest, the 1% that I talked about for the inpatient side, looking at pretty much keeping our length of stay near where it's at. The one thing that you don't see in this 1% is that, there is the potential for us to get some feed volume, and we have had some preliminary discussions that, if that kind of comes through, it could add, 150 admissions at about, 2.5-day length of stay. But again, I just kind of keep that separated out as a potential initiative for us so that we can kind of keep an eye on what the base does. From an outpatient side, we're really pretty much in the 2% range other than, the overall, the non-ER outpatient visits. We do believe that there's really more room for about 2.5%, again, through some of the potential growth we've seen, but also we've had a lot of downtime this year on the, imaging side, and we've had a couple of times where, like, rehab slow up a little bit, but they seem to pick up pretty quick. Next slide. Okay, here a little bit breakdown. So this is the shift I was talking about in surgeries. You can see we're projecting about 130 fewer inpatient surgeries, but 179 more outpatient surgeries. And then at this point, we are also projecting our cath lab. We ratcheted those down a little bit from our initial projections, which were up closer to 235-ish. And these are currently all outpatient based. But, this also, we want to kind of keep it pulled out, kind of as an initiative, as there's just a lot of outstanding questions about the when and how. A little further breakdown, we're pretty much kind of expecting that ED admissions following ED outpatient visits will run in the same percentage. We tend to run between 6 and 7% of our ED visits and as admissions. And, with a 2% increase in ED visits overall, we'd be up close to averaging 97 a day. Now we're sitting at about 94 a day. And then at the bottom, just we're going to project a modest 1% deliveries growth, which really only adds about 8 more deliveries. And then we've brought out some of the larger volume areas of imaging, rehab, and the other non-cath lab kind of cardiac care. You can see projecting in the imaging and rehab about 2.5%, and in things like echoes and EKGs, a little over 1%. Some of these things, they didn't really start out as 1.3 or 2.3. It's the fact that we're going from a 366 day to days per year to a 365. But sometimes the rounding off a little. Next slide. So this is kind of slide I was trying to lead to, and this is very high level. The numbers will not be this, but this gives you a sense of just doing math. It says, right now, I am forecasting my year-end net revenue at about $149 million, and I'm estimating that my net revenue, patient net revenue, with these volumes and a CDM increase and a 0.5%, or so, net revenue pickup be about 1.5, or 151 million. Other revenue, which is those, non-patient care revenues that we get, and includes like an alliance incentive. It includes the fact that we do recognize revenue from the Packard loan when we make a payment, even though it's not, the cash is already in the door and spent, we still have to do the revenue recognition, things like that. So you can see, we had a big pickup this year, $906,000 that will not repeat next year. So that's why you can see some of the decrease there. And so net revenue, right now I'm just coming in shy of $156 million. On the expense side, I just did a very conservative approach here. I expect to end the year around $151 million. And if I pretty much put that 3%, I think I just 3% in for these numbers, because we haven't done all the detailed budgeting below. You can see I'm spending almost $156 million. And so the EBITDA ahead of, right this year, I mean, we're not there yet. We've got some favorable EBITDA, but we're not at this 3.9. But we have the potential for, hitting almost $4 million worth of EBITDA by the end of the year. But this budget suggests not, having just inflationary factors and things driving the expense, and knowing, without growth, we won't get more volume necessarily to drive up the revenue. We would, we'd be much closer to break even. But we need to be driving towards year-over-year improvement. So, my target for this year is that we need to hit about $3.6 million worth of EBITDA and $5 million for next year. So right now, if this was the budget that I was, this is kind of where the budget's roughly sitting, I've got about a $5 million gap. And, there's a lot of work going into this. I've kind of looked at this from the perspective of what would it take to close up that gap. I think there's probably close to half of that, maybe about 2.2 million of that probably needs to come on the net revenue side. There's probably $1.5 million or so that needs to come on the labor productivity side, and the rest needs to come from other expenses getting reduced, and supplies is going to be a big piece of that. And, as we get further into the analysis that we're doing, those buckets and things may shift in how we find things and how we further refine the numbers. But, I can tell you, we need to be hitting a $5 million EBITDA just to meet all of our requirements. And I would like to be able to do better than that, because it's going to be the stuff over $5 million that's going to give us more like capital for capital expenditures. I think that's my last slide. Oh, no, I have one more. This doesn't tell you a whole lot at this point, but I wanted to, we want to start producing some FTE-related reporting as well. So this is current kind of through June. This is how the productive FTE. So basically 82% of our hours paid, because we have about 18% non-productive time, which really surprises me when I put it to numbers, but it's like 120 FTEs worth of non-productive time, and 400 FTEs worth of productive. But it just kind of gives you a little sense of how it breaks out. So we've got about 71 FTEs on the units other than labor and delivery, and OB, they have another 38 or so, about 41 in the ER, about 21 in surgery. Nursing admin, we just kind of pulled out because they support all of those areas. Our ancillary departments, the patient care ancillaries are about 84. administrative, which is your typical overhead departments, admin, HR, finance, coding, things like that. And then the other patient care support services, this is things like your case management, your admitting, social services, dietary, things that a little bit more direct, directly related to patient care. And we just wanted to kind of tease them out a bit from the administrative. So, the comments I'll make about this at this point, we still have, a lot more detailed work that we're doing with labor standards. Phyllis has started a project within her nursing units to really kind of drill into their staffing matrices and get things aligned, better with, how those FTE resources are actually being used, and clean up our processes there a bit. So we know there'll be some changes here, but we will also be looking for productivity improvements as we get things better aligned. And unless the volume really grows, these numbers are not going to grow, because we have the kind of room in our current labor standards for the volumes that we're projecting. So might see the buckets move around a little bit, but basically about where we expect to land. Next slide. I think the next slide is it. Okay. Wanted to kind of where we're at. We are still going to be pushing hard to have a November sign-off versus a mid-December sign-off, but I think there's still a lot of work to do here.
Question not directly related. I remember at the time, first being process, trying to get contracts maybe from the 50% of. Are we 2 years later, is it time to
That's already been done. That was done as part of the restructure and coming out of bankruptcy. All the major contracts were renegotiated, and then some of them were 3-year contracts, so they had 3 years worth of rates. And some of them we're almost always in negotiation with somebody. So some of them we are currently negotiating or, coming close to another 1-year term, or trying to take one that was a 1-year contract, and for the second go-around, make it a 2 or 3 year. So each one has its own unique things. All the payers are still, saying, well, we got a budget to meet too, and our basic thing to them is, the first go-around was this hospital has not increased rates for so many years. They're so far below market. So the first one was it's up to market or close to market. Everything after that is to stay within market and not fall below again.
But it's already in market, if I remember right.
Yeah, that part predated me.
Yeah.
We don't, when we have our calls, we don't tend to talk about, we talk just about being at market, but we don't really tend to talk about it until I said for 50th percentile. When we've talked with certain groups, they've certainly said either you're right at market with what we're paying, Dominican or competitors in the area. Sometimes that will come up, but yeah, I don't know. The whole time I've been here, we haven't looked at it as kind of a percentile.
And that would probably be very costly.
Yeah, we pay Guidehouse a lot of money right now just to help us with this process. We have been working to, somewhat develop more of our own internal skills around some of the analysis. We're very lucky to have Vanessa, because she has a payer background, and so she got that, can, put that hat on and help us think through, have a look at certain things. Very strong on the analysis side. But we are still also reliant on the managed care part of Guidehouse to help us through some of this.
I have kind of a bigger question, but I think that was a really good question to be into, like, how, instead of us just listening and receiving information, how can we at the board and might we help this from, like, we're at 52, 5% market with that out there. I don't know where we're at with it. We're just a bare minimum with.
I think, I mean, if you're talking about like a market share of what percentage of the commercial market share,
Well, it's both. It's advertising, it's promotion, it's advocacy, it's partnerships thing for now, but also on the, just the pure revenue, what we're billing, so we can increase that bill rate to more than just the half. So I think it's both and.
yeah, well, I mean, where I was going was all the things you listed out, which is really the strategic planning
Yeah.
committee is really more where the board's gonna be helpful. You know, the advocacy, the, outreach, you know, the marketing and strategic planning pieces of it. You know, here, I mean, it's a numbers game.
Yep.
You know, we can make the charges what we wanna make them, but again, the contracts are really what's going to limit us in terms of how much reimbursement we actually see from them, because, you know, some contracts will have lesser of language built in that says, you know, if you surpass a certain threshold of a CDM increase, and that can be anything from 0 to 2%, you can charge whatever you want, but we're just still gonna pay you this amount, which is basically erode, you know, that overall percent collected of the charges. You know, there's just so much opportunity here that we are always discovering something else that we can, you know, like the supply charging, or, you know, are we charging for all the procedures or extra things that we do that can be charged for that maybe just have been missed in the past? We're just always identifying more and more of that. It's not something the board's necessarily gonna be able to help us with. I think where you come in of value as we're having, you know, budget conversations is the types of questions you're asking, and just, you're seeing something there and just wondering, well, why are they thinking that can go up or down or sideways? You know, ask those questions, because we can be too close to the data at some point too, and then somebody asks a question and you go back and look at it and go, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you know. That's, you know, the biggest value is, believe me, you don't wanna be in the I don't even wanna be in the spreadsheet for it, sometimes doing the budgeting, you don't wanna be in those. But, you know, we're trying to bring you a little bit more detail versus just like, well, here's what we're gonna do with days and discharges, 3% here and 5% there, done. I want you to kind of see what we're thinking about and trying to massage together to make a
Top level, you know, high level question, I presume this still include the rent payment, being it 2.5 and sales tax. These are those business also, would be two sizable swings, progress on that.
Right, yeah, and, you know, if we had a better crystal ball about like when the property purchase could be done. Right now, and you can notice I didn't really go below the EBITDA line for now, but we know what the rent payment is for next year, so the rest of that, you know, wouldn't change too much, but certainly if we can get that property purchased even by, you know, December at 25, we get a little bit of pickup there. You know, the sales tax, I've got Grace over here, like scouring anywhere she can think of that, you know, somebody else we can call and ask and try to figure out how do we get to the sales tax exemption. Does it still exist? You know, there's some question about, you know, I mean, I think it still exists, but, you know, it used to be you'd have vendors calling you like, we can save you money. And it's like, those stuff kind of dried up. I don't get those calls anymore, but we're trying to figure that out. Yeah, I mean, we couldn't do anything really about it until we got our 501c designation, which came almost a year ago now, I think it was about last October. And then, you know, we've been going through the welfare and property tax exemption process, and some of that required, like, amending the bylaws, because there was some little, one sentence change that was not, the Board of Equalization wasn't accepting. And then there's the sales tax piece, and, you know, when we went there, it was like, everybody else was like pointing to somebody else, like, I don't know, you know, that, we don't do that, you know, and so, we just, I mean, it's, unfortunately, this is something we can put every hour of every day into tracking down, so it kind of falls off the radar a little bit at times, but it's, you know, we've been just trying to figure out who can answer this question for us and how would we go about doing it. But one minute I think maybe it's not there, and then somebody says, oh yeah, but so-and-so put in a request for the sales tax certification or something. And it's like, okay, well, where's that? What's the status on that? We're kind of, it's like kind of a bit of the blind leading the blind, because none of us knows exactly what that process should look like. So, you know, we take like any nugget and try to chase that down to figure it out. So certainly, here's, you know, if you have any folks you know through the county or other places that kind of focus in on this area, we'll take any leads we can get.
That's several contacts in TFA, which is the
Yeah.
Board of Equalization, that oversees sales tax, in addition to several consultants solve problem questions.
Yeah.
I believe too.
Yeah, because Grace is our point of contact there, and did you call CT?
I called I did call the sales tax, and I spoke to one of their tax experts, and he referred us to the publication 18. And so now that Jessica's back, we're gonna have to email them questions and answers kind of thing, and they'll get back to us. But then speaking to Kathy, she says we already have something in place and that she spoke to somebody, so I'll have to refer to her as well, because I don't know who she's talking to.
I don't know either, because I had asked her about it a couple months ago. I
Yeah.
said, you know, ask some of your Sutter contacts or something.
But she said she actually spoke to somebody from the state, the
Okay.
Board of Equalization, and I'm not sure who she's talking to, because the tax consultant that I spoke to, there's various things, there's only certain things that you can claim exempt on, and we just need to find out if we fall within that, like, the food sales, for instance.
Yep.
We don't qualify for that. It does say that on the publication. But there might be other stuff that we can qualify for.
Yeah. Most of them. So you could be, so any contacts or leads you have would certainly help us and keep finding our way on this one, because I am hopeful that we find some exemption possibilities and that there's some retroactivity.
Sending me an email, Grace, next week. Hey, Marcus, where are you on that? Actually, I've got 3 people I can think of right now, I'll contact this week, start the ball rolling.
Oh, great.
But send me a reminder, that I'll hold them accountable. On the FTE, I appreciate that schedule, and that's really helpful to see it that way. Do those productive FTEs include whether they're staff or travelers? Registry, yeah. How, are we if we were to trend line our use of registry, are we still trending less and less, or are we kind of hit a plateau where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, we're below what we budgeted for the year. It's, you know, when you look at it month over month, it doesn't vary that much. A lot of times it seems like, you know, you do fill a position that's been filled by registry, but then a different need comes up, you know, so it's a little bit one in, one out sort of thing. There's, you know, a little bit, but we are down from what we had budgeted and from where we were running last year.
Recently, heard a historical piece of interest. When I first came to town, it was in the midst of an 18-month cannery strike. Apparently, OB was quite busy for the whole second half. That came up serious.
I guess getting back to the charge master or the CMD, CDM, what the D is, but you know, the 3% you have in there, that's just a swag and we'll try for 6 or we'll try for 8, or do you think 3 is what we'll have to?
We'll probably not exceed 3. Charge description master, I think that's what it is. I've always had to do. The reason is because, we have to, anytime we do an update, we have to notify the payers that we're doing this update. And there are these, guardrails in the contracts that say, you know, either you're allowed 0% update, in which case they'll just apply lesser of language, or you're allowed an update of, you know, 1% or 3%. So, I mean, we triggered a little bit of that last year, but we needed to in order to right-size some of our rates that were so far off. Whereas this year, you know, because we do on some of the shoppable services and the higher volume services, we do kind of a competitor analysis to make sure we're somewhere in the middle of where our competitors are and we're not sitting way below or way above. And so, you know, we will kind of look at that, but, you know, I think 3% will be about tops.
That's what Pat has suggested, that range of 2. Monitoring it. But it's good up for us, that we've been pretty much every week. Keep us informed that it's not a flag, that it's very specific.
On the terms of the contracts we negotiated, before all of you were here, personally, do we have a sense of which ones, when they come due and when we're able to renegotiate those?
Yeah. I mean, the bigger ones like Alliance and Kaiser were all 3-year contracts, so we're kind of in the middle of those. We've been negotiating with Blue Shield, Aetna. I think we're still in the middle of a contract with Anthem. Where UHC falls in, but the bigger ones are either, most of them were 3-year deals. Aetna and Blue Shield are the 2 that come to mind that were kind of 1-year deals.
So the next, just leading off where you finished the presentation, we're 4.9 million short to get to our 5 million target. That's reflecting that there's still work to be done at that level. We're still crunching numbers, and then that will, when that's finalized, it will be revised as estimate. And it sounds like September will be going back to bring that back to the committee in September.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're still gonna push ourselves as if we're having an August finance committee meeting, because I'd like to be taking an update to the August board meeting, you know. So, you know, by the end of August, I want a solid base budget where we have, you know, kind of refined any of our, assumptions around inflationary factors or things like that, and really done the base over base analysis. And at that point, hopefully, you know, we've got some of these initiatives that will be a little further along in terms of projecting what they're worth, or if they're really gonna go or not go, sort of thing. And then that'll give us a sense of what's our gap to the target at that point. But also by then we should have, I don't know if we will completely have the productivity piece, the staffing matrices that's being worked on, but we'll have a good portion of that kind of done, so we can start to see how that's playing out, and then go from there.
Just a clarification, productive FTEs are right around 400. We have another 2 non-productive.
It's really about 120 FTEs. We have about 650 bodies, you know, but it really works out to about 500 FTEs.
There's no finance meeting in August.
We were just having
It's a
a,
revelation with my failure to communicate and I'll be out of the country. And more reflection of this, they're gonna be filling the weeds, it'll be just a focus on one meeting.
yeah,
So the same other people come to the board, we'll get it. So, that's a meeting for us at that one time to have, so it'll be the September meeting, for the week, so,
Got it.
going deep. So that was just my sharing, just for the team. Yeah. Concerning to see the gap. And how do I put it, like, if anybody's watching, they're gonna be, they won't like my commentary, I'm impressed and happy with, that we know this, and where we're at, it's July, and we're already this far along in the process. I'm seeing the metrics that we hadn't had, that I haven't seen as a board member yet, come to light, and I appreciate everybody's work on this. I'm very impressed with the process that was set up, and far enhanced, far further along than even I thought we would be. So I'm just grateful of where we're at, and I trust that we'll try to find new numbers forward to continue. Great to hold me accountable.
Before you go out of the country.
Yeah. I'll give you my cell number anytime. I appreciate all the work and the quality presentation, quality of the lesson. Any questions from other board members? Echo Jessica, this is your time to grill Julie.
bring it on.
Yeah. All right, any questions from our audience? All right, this is a receive and file, imagine the same information, generally speaking, will be presented tomorrow night at the board, so thank you. Close this item, and unless there's anything else, we are